As president, I cannot make decisions on foreign policy in a futile effort to appease partisan critics or the media or Democrats who want to do nothing but resist and obstruct. Constructive dialogue between the United States and Russia affords the opportunity to open new pathways toward peace and stability in our world.
The high-stakes Trump-Putin summit and the media reaction was intense today. Here now on that, Howard Kurtz, host of Media Buzz and author of the new book, Media Madness, Donald Trump, the Press, and the War Over the Truth. Andrew McCarthy is a former federal prosecutor, and Byron York, chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner. Both are Fox News contributors. Gentlemen, thank you all for being here this evening. You know, Byron, a lot of very tough reaction to what we saw in there today. The president getting hit from all sides. Newt Gingrich saying it's the biggest mistake of his presidency to date. And it's clear from the tweet that the president sent on his way out of town that he knows that there is fixing to be done.
Yeah, I think when assessing the reaction, you have to look at some of the usual suspects who freak out about Trump every single day, and they're flipping out now. You can maybe discount some of that stuff. Separate those from the people who've been more balanced on Trump and who've not gotten upset with everything he's done, who believe that today he made a serious mistake, and his serious mistake was not taking the side of not only U.S. intelligence agencies, but the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate in taking their side over election meddling over the Russians. Yeah. And that was a significant mistake that the president is going to have to fix. Yeah.
I mean, to hear the president say that, I know our intelligence folks, and Howard, you can take this one first if you would. Dan Coates said what he said. They believe that, there was meddling. But President Putin gave a very strong and powerful denial to that, and I can't see why he would have done it. How did that strike you?
Well, in that moment, under the white-hot spotlight in Helsinki, it seemed to almost everyone who was watching, the President of the United States was siding with Putin, was taking the word of this former KGB spy over his own U.S. intelligence agencies. And that's why the intense media criticism, Martha, has cut across the usual partisan lines. I mean, you have news anchors like CNN's Anderson Cooper saying one of the most disgraceful performances by an American president. Of course, you have Obama administration liberals, even David Axelrod on CNN, usually a little sober-minded. He likened him to Neville Chamberlain after meeting Hitler. I think some of that is over the top, but when you have a Newt Gingrich, a huge Trump ally, when you have conservatives, others on Fox News, when you have the National Review and the Weekly Standard, all saying these were serious stumbles, serious missteps on such a global stage, I think it's clear that the president gave his detractors a lot of ammunition today.
Andy.
Yeah, I really think the problem begins, Martha, with having the summit in the first place. I do not understand the obsession with this whole idea that we have to have good relations with Russia. We've done perfectly fine in the past at times not having good relations with Russia. Russia is an anti-American, aggressive thug country, and the only way we can have good relations with them is if we accommodate what it is that makes them a terrible regime. So I think the mistake is almost inevitable from today, in the sense that the mistake was having this forum in the first place, where the United States president has to be in the presence of this autocrat, this despot, and treat him as if he were a statesman. Yeah,
so you have to ask yourself, Byron, why, right? It's very clear that the president went into this moment, this news conference, he wanted to present we've turned a page, that all that changed 4 hours ago. He is very determined to show that he's going to have a different relationship with this man. He said it all through the campaign, and he worked very hard and bent over backwards, some might say, to achieve that today. He clearly wants to, have better trade relationships with them. Vladimir Putin was talking to Chris Wallace about cars and, the kind of business that agreements that they could reach where cars are concerned, and possibly wants to peel him away in some respects from President Xi in China, sees perhaps an alliance between these two countries, the United States and Russia, as something that might be a bulwark against China. Thoughts on any of that?
Well, all of those are perfectly legitimate geopolitical issues, but the president's problem today stems from his apparent obsession with the Trump-Russia investigation, or at least the part of the investigation that targets him. And he basically is not able to separate the two parts of the Trump-Russia investigation. There's the what Russia did part of the investigation, which tries to find out what Russian measures were attempting to influence the campaign. And then there's the get Trump part of the investigation, which our Democrats are using to try to disable the president, possibly remove him from office. It's perfectly legitimate to fight back on the latter, but not so much on the former, because there is bipartisan agreement of these Russian efforts. And yet the president appears to believe that if he gives even an inch on conceding that there was this Russian effort, then they'll all take a mile in the effort to get Trump.
It would have been refreshingly different to hear the president say, you know what, forget about me. There's no collusion, which he did say. There's none of that. But, you know, my folks at home are pretty clear that there was some meddling. You guys meddled. A lot of countries try to get in the middle of other countries' elections. That's not going to happen anymore. And just moved on. But I want to get back for a moment to the media response, because we have a montage I want to play. And then, Howie, I'd like to get you to sort of weigh in on what we see here. Let's watch.
Perhaps one of the most disgraceful performances by an American president at a summit in front of a Russian leader, certainly that I've ever seen.
And I have never seen an American president simply surrender to the leader of Russia. You should call this the Surrender Summit.
A patriot is someone who defends the honor of their country. We just saw the President of the United States do the exact opposite.
Separating the difference between his election win and Russian interference in the election is a difficult thing rhetorically, I think, for this president, because a lot of times it's about him.
Howie.
You know, I often think that when President Trump goes too far, says something offensive, or makes a mistake, his critics sort of play into his hands by going over the top. I mean, some of this talk we're hearing from John Brennan about treason and so forth, I think is over the top. He made some serious mistakes today, and then, of course, the press ratchets it up to 11, as they do on just about everything. But the fact that it is also coming from the Republican side, from the conservative side, from people like Newt Gingrich, I think drives home the point that I don't agree there shouldn't have been a summit. American presidents spoke to Soviet leaders during the worst years of the Cold War. Russia has a lot of nuclear weapons. We need to deal with Russia. But knowing this was going to come up, the fact that the president couldn't find a way to say, oh, let's not litigate the past, let's move on, instead seemed to side with Putin over Dan Coates, as director of national intelligence, for example, I think has dug him into a political hole. And I don't think this is a 1 or 2 day story.
We'll see what Dan Coates does next. Gentlemen, thank you. Great to see you all tonight.